the static, dissecting issues diplomatic. With mics in hand, they brave the storm of clashing views and norms transform. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining light on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. From climate change to foreign ties, they parse the spin and sift the lies. No stone unturned, no topic taboo, as left and right come into view. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining light on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. From climate change to foreign ties, they parse the spin and sift the lies. No stone unturned, no topic taboo, as left and right come into view. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining light on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. In times of strife when tensions flare, their steady voices fill the air. With wisdom gained from years gone by, and hopes for brighter days tonight, the Pundits Podcast marches on their epic quest, not yet done, to understand our changing world and keep democracy's flag unfurled.
Hey everybody, it's Razib Khan here with Josiah and Neely of R Street. So just really quickly, we got some new people on the Substack because we got some signups. We've been promoting it here and there, so thank you for signing up. Also, if you are not a paid subscriber, you will obviously get the ungated version, and I would really appreciate it if you put in a positive review of our erudition and our incisiveness on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and also you can subscribe on YouTube. You guys can find us Khanversation on all those places. Actually, I'm just gonna put the links from now on to the ungated versions on those platforms as well, because I know some of you like to subscribe that way. In fact, I know that some people who pay for the Substack, my unsupervised learning Substack, actually still subscribe on Apple Podcasts because they talk to me about things that are weeks late. So it's fine. But I'm sure I do the same, actually. So I'm not hating. But anyway, go on, Josiah. You're saying something.
I will say, as someone who does subscribe to your Substack, so I get the full, early access podcast, whatever. I still sometimes will listen to the episodes, weeks or maybe even months after the fact, because those episodes, they're not, unlike Khanversations, which is like cutting edge and about the news of the day. You're talking about Indo-Europeans or, even when you're talking, like, I think you just had, is it Christina
Buttons?
Yeah. Buttons.
Yeah, Buttons.
I'm sorry, but it's about gender stuff. So I haven't listened to that one. That's obviously a topic of the day, but it's not tied to any.
Yeah.
It's still going to be relevant in 3 weeks, I think,
Yeah, and I wanted to, and that was like, that's, as you know, it's that was like, it's the plan. It's a feature, not a bug. I really want to do a podcast, so I've been doing, at minimum, I mean, to be fair, I do record a lot of them ahead of time because of the way I designed it with being evergreen, but I've been releasing at least one podcast every single week since I think December of 2020. So, but sometimes I record a lot of them earlier, and I'll like release them like months, sometimes 6 months later. I still have one that I never found a good time to release, that I recorded in March of 2021 with Kyle Kashuv. Anyway, so I will release it someday.
That's
The longest delay that I've had so far is actually 3 years. So, but anyway, yeah. So obviously, I do pick topics and people where it's not very time sensitive, and so people have asked me for years. So why are we here at Conversation? Part of the reason is people have asked me for years. I want to know your opinion about things you don't know about. I'm summarizing. They didn't say it that way, but they're like, what do you think about politics? What do you think about economy? What do you think about this culture war issue? And I'm like, I don't really do that because who's going to be listening to this 6 months from now about this opinion and stuff like that? So I can't do that for unsupervised learning. But on Conversation, we're trying to do things that are very topical, like the vice presidential pick for Kamala Harris.
yes, and somewhere in my mind, because Kamala Harris is herself the vice president, it always feels a little weird for me to say, the VP pick for Harris.
Yeah, the VP for the VP.
The VP, yeah, the VP.
Well, the VP pick for the vice president, because that's literally what it is. Because she's still the vice president. Because and
the nominee.
Let's just set the stage a little bit for non-Americans, because I know we got some non-Americans in the audience. Obviously, we're going to talk about foreign stuff later. We're going to talk about the Bangladesh government overthrow, which I listened to 2 podcasts about it. Well, I mean, I was on the podcast technically, but I didn't say anything because I don't know. I didn't know anything. But anyway, so we do foreign stuff. But for America, so Joe Biden is not running for the the nomination's over, but he stopped running for the nomination of the Democratic Party. So he is not running to be president of the United States come next year, okay, for the election in November. But he is still president of the United States. He did not resign that position. So Kamala Harris is still vice president, which is actually pretty convenient for her because that is a job that traditionally doesn't require you to do anything. So she can just campaign full time, And if there's something that's useful for her campaign, she can show up there as vice president.
Yeah, well, although, I mean, plenty of presidents have run for re-election while serving as president. I
but
think,
they have higher energy levels than Biden.
well, yes, but I mean, I think probably, and I'm not I'm not like a political consultant. I don't do polling or focus groups or whatever, but it seems to me that, and she seems to be doing okay. If you look in the polls and in the prediction markets and everything, all the forecasts, I think they have her maybe even as a slight lead right now. But it just seems to me that probably if Biden had resigned not the presidency, that she would be in a much stronger position even than she is today, because then she would be the president. And typically, people want the president to succeed, right? And especially when she's just become the president, I think there would be a rush of support to her from that. How long it would last, I don't know. It kind of depends on what happens if there's like a crisis or she does something dumb in the meantime. But yeah, it's like 3 months. So. Obviously, for whatever reason, that's not the strategy that they're pursuing. Maybe Biden just didn't want, was not willing to do that, or who knows? But yeah. So she remains the vice president. She's running for president. That's not itself also not that unusual, I guess. Yeah.
Gore,
HW, right? Yeah. So it does. That does happen. Anyway, we kind of got sidetracked a little bit, but so yes, so she picked Tim Walz, who's the governor of Minnesota, as her VP. I know in our inaugural episode, we both gave our predictions for who it was, and we're both.
Yeah, I lost so much play money in Manifold. Well, I bet like 3/4 of my Manifold wealth on Josh Shapiro.
Yeah. So I did make about $20 on Predict It for Tim Walz, but it was kind of an accident. So in Predict It, this is for people who don't know, this is a betting market where you can go and you can, bet money on who's going to be the president, who's going to be the vice presidential nominee, the different nominees, whatever. I think it's the only betting market that you are allowed to use officially as an American. There's some other ones that are out there. Well, I don't know if that's true, but certainly, it's the largest American one. And I'm active on Predict It, but my strategy is I only do arbitrage. So if you look at the markets, typically, if it's a binary market, like there's some markets that are binary, like will Harris be the 47th president, right? Yes, no. Okay, so that's a binary market. The two options there are going to roughly add up to, they're going to add up to 100. They have to, basically. But for markets that have a bunch of options, they kind of get oversubscribed. So if you add them all up, they'll be significantly greater than 100%. You could get like 108%, 109% sometimes. So I basically just, when I see markets that are like that, I just take the no on everything, and then I'm guaranteed to get money, right? And the good thing about Predicted is when you do that, it gives you the money right away, so you don't even have to wait. So you can kind of do it over and over again. Anyway, but I screwed up.
Yeah, this is news you can use for the listener.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. I'm giving you actually marketable information here, but I screwed up. There's limits at how much you can bet in a given market. Like you tap out once you put a certain number of money in it. And I screwed up so that I had bet too much for Tim Walz. And so that, I actually ended up making more money because I had bet too much compared to everybody else for him. Now, the reason I had done that is because when I bet, and so this is the point why I'm mentioning all this. When I bet on Tim Walz, the reason why I bet too much is because he was only at 1%, like Shapiro was at 30, Mark Kelly, I think, was at 40, right? And nobody was thinking of Tim Walz as the guy, even in the press accounts up until like the very end, he was not really mentioned as like on the short list or whatever. It was basically Shapiro, Kelly. There was a Bashir, I guess, the governor, and
early on there was Cooper, but he dropped out.
Yeah. So they, I don't know if you have any, like what you're thinking is of like why they did that, why they didn't go with, obviously Shapiro was supposed to be the guy, and then at the last minute they went with
anti-Semitism.
Right. So people,
Bethany Mandel and a lot of conservative pundits were explained because they have like an in, obviously, in terms of the Harris campaign's thinking. And Kamala Harris is a well-known anti-Semite. You can ask her Jewish husband all about it. So anyway, I mean, basically, I don't know why they're going with I know why they're going with the anti-Semitism angle, but it's just like, it's a little ludicrous. It sounds like, from all the reporting in places like Politico, some of it is just there's lack of chemistry, which happens.
Yeah. So I don't obviously think that Kamala Harris is herself an anti-Semite. I think the rationale was that obviously with Israel and Gaza, that whole thing that's going on, that's been a source of a lot of friction within the Democratic coalition. There have been a lot of protests, about that. Supposedly, they're at the convention later this month in Chicago. There's supposed to be a bunch of protests, and there is a sizable Arab community in Michigan. I don't know. I mean, it's not huge, but it's probably, I think Michigan might be the state with the largest Arab population. They're not.
Yeah, I think so. It goes back to Syrian Christians.
Right.
I mean, now that we call them Lebanese, but back then it was Syrian Christians that went to work for Henry Ford. So.
Right. Yeah, and but so a lot of them are not Muslim, although there are.
I mean, it's not just Arabs too. Hamtramck has a lot of has a lot of Yemeni. Well, Yemenis are Arab, but a lot of Bangladeshis in Hamtramck. So basically, it starts up the Syrian Christians. They bring the Arab Muslims because they have like whatever the services, the food, the connections, and then the Arab Muslims like then other Muslims. So it's actually also a big Muslim state in general.
Yes, right. Yeah. So it's a higher than average Muslim population, higher than average Arab population. And so, and Michigan is, of course, a must-win state, I would say, for Harris. And so they were worried that maybe that's going to that would hurt them there. And another issue, I think that it didn't get a lot of media play.
Well, just really quickly, I want to jump in with some data. I looked it up while you're talking. That our Arab Americans, according to the Arab American Institute, are 1.6% of Michigan's population. They're 0.6% of California's population. So there's about 800,000 Arab Americans in California and 500,000 in Michigan. So it is technically not the largest, but I'm pretty sure of those 800,000 in California, I bet you like a lot of them are like part Arab. I'm just saying, Michigan has a really intense Arab American whatever. But anyway, go on.
Right. So anyway, so that's one of the concerns, and then the other concern, which didn't get as much play, but in the media, but when I talked to people about it, it seemed like that was also a concern. Is Shapiro, I guess, has had some conflicts with unions in Pennsylvania, with the labor movement, particularly teachers unions. He's not, I mean, I wouldn't say he's got like conservative views on any of that stuff, but I think he's like more open to charter school, something like that. Or like Clinton type education reforms, and so the unions don't like that. I know there's like a big split. John Fetterman, who's the senator there, who comes like, that's more his background or whatever. He doesn't like Shapiro. And so the union people, who are themselves a powerful base in the Democratic Party, they said, we don't like Shapiro, we don't like Kelly, we like Walz, right? Because I guess he's, Democratic farm labor, he's more in tune with that. So those are probably like the two knocks against him. And then, as you said, I think as we discussed, really there's not a lot of evidence that people vote based on the vice president in general. I mean, certainly like the big argument for Shapiro that I heard, there's two arguments, but one of them was, well, he's the governor of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is also a swing state. It's a must-win state for Harris. She's got a lot of must-win states, but so they said, well, if you pick him, Pennsylvania, that will help her win Pennsylvania. I don't think there's any polling that suggests that. I think they did internal polling and it said it doesn't really matter. And in general, I think that's true. When political scientists have looked at this, they find that if picking someone from a certain state as your VP does not move the needle in that state, because people are voting for the president, not for the VP. So I think they decided that they could go with Walz. He was maybe they got along. I think he's obviously a traditional role for a vice presidential candidate as an attack dog. You make attacks on the opposing party. And even if people, the problem with negative attacks, they say, is it damages the person you're attacking, but it also damages you, because voters don't like it. But if you're the VP, like the presidential candidate can kind of stay a little bit above the fray. The VP can be the attack dog. Trump doesn't do that. Trump is his own attack dog, so, but for Walz, it seems like he's willing to play that role. He's pretty good on the stump. I've seen some like clips of him at rallies or whatever. Frankly, he's more charismatic, in my opinion, than Kamala, who tends to be a little, I don't know. I mean, I think it's been remarkable.
Wooden. I think wooden would be a word.
Yeah, like wooden, awkward, a little. Yeah, she's got kind of several registers, and they can kind of swing back and forth. She's sometimes, like, people have commented about the laugh and some of her weird diction, sort of the cadence of her speech. But she can shift from that into like a super serious mode as well and kind of go back and forth. It's a little,
Prosecutor mode.
yeah, she goes into prosecutor mode. It could be a little, in my opinion, it's a little off putting. I don't know. Other people obviously can have different views on that. But so, Walz, I think he'll be good. There has been a lot of controversy, I think, after his pick, both about how liberal he is in stuff they did in Minnesota, but then also the bigger thing just about his military record. Walz was in the National Guard. He was scheduled to be deployed to Iraq, and right before the deployment, he quit the army so he could run for Congress. J.D. Vance, who served in the Marines, not in a combat role, but he did serve, attacked him for that. Some other people, I know some people who are like vets or whatnot who are kind of upset about this. But I don't know. Again, this seems to be, and like I should say, I come from a long line of people who did not serve. Right, I did not serve. Dad did not serve. My grandfather did not serve. I think the last family member who fought in a war, it might have been the Civil War, and I don't know which side we were on. I do know which.
Probably not the right one.
Yeah, right.
If you don't know, I'm just saying. If you're happy, don't talk about it.
Yeah, right. Well, they did talk about that, maybe not so much anymore, but anyway, the point is, this seems to be like a much bigger deal if you're a veteran, like this sort of stuff matters. Like if you're a non-vet, like me, some of the distinctions that people are talking about, it's like, it's hard for me to evaluate, it's like, cause he was in the National Guard for a long time. Obviously they let him leave, so, like, okay, if you say, well, I've done my, I've done a certain amount of time, the rules say I can leave. There's a controversy. Was he a sergeant major or merely a master sergeant? To me, like, I don't know how to evaluate that. To vets, obviously they have a bigger sense of that, but as we said, I don't know that people vote based on being, who the vice presidential candidate is anyway. And then B, most people are not vets. I think it's only 6% of voters who are veterans, so that's not nothing, but that's a small group, and probably most of them already have strong feelings, one way or the other. So probably it's not going to make a big, it's not going to matter much in terms of like electoral politics, but it is something that has taken up a lot of time on the airwaves.
Yeah, I think basically your thoughts are pretty much the same as mine. I do think, it's also one of those things where it's almost, I feel like the military stuff often for politicians, it's kind of baked into the cake or it's priced in because there's like literally been never a case where a politician has kind of like underemphasized their military background. Like almost always there's like there's little
yes, right. Yeah.
It's like exaggerating on your resume. And like nobody ever calls you out on it unless you're
sure.
Nominated to be VP or something. Yeah, or Sharma, yeah. But nobody ever calls people out on it. And it's just people just like little white lies. And also a lot of times it's not an explicit lie, it's people let people assume things. So there's certain ways you can say that you're a veteran. So I think he was like, whatever, Walz was stationed in Italy or something like that. And he said he was a veteran, but he didn't say that he was a veteran and he did his service in Italy. People will just assume Afghanistan or Iraq. People will just assume things. This is so common. Or for example, if you get a degree from Harvard Extension School, most of those people will say they have a degree from Harvard. They will not, which is technically true, actually. But it's not the same as, anyway, my point here is I think a lot of that is priced in. I think, I'm just going to bring this up. Guys about the same age as Kamala Harris,
Yeah.
but he looks ancient. So I actually think that's probably good because it makes him seem like he's. So what? Because you were talking about how the vice president has no big electoral impact, and maybe we should talk about JD a little because we have a couple of weeks now, and you know, I'm of the philosophy if you have nothing nice to say, don't say much, and so I haven't been saying much because I'm not saying that I'm like negative on it, but there's been a lot of mixed reviews on JD's performance. But with Tim Walz, you know, okay, he's probably not going to make that much of an impact in the Midwest. He's a VP, et cetera, et cetera. The big impact is if Kamala, if something happens to her, I don't know, and she can't serve out the term, she becomes president. He looks kind of like the Truman style president, like Truman style Midwestern folksy president.
Right.
Like, he looks appropriate. Probably like he was a governor of Minnesota. He probably has enough chops that he can do okay job. So is he ready for on day one? So for example, if you asked at the same time of the campaign in 2020, is Kamala Harris ready on day one? I'm really not sure because she was senator, and senators, their legislatures, they don't do executive stuff. She was a prosecutor, but that's a very narrow, delimited role. I think when it's a governor, if a governor has been a governor for 2 years, for example,
Right.
that's enough. But if a senator has been senator for 2 years, I'm not really sure. Now, Obama was senator for 2 years, so whatever. But my point is, I grade senators and governors differently. I think he's definitely ready on day one. He's got a lot of diverse experiences. And also, unlike some people, he doesn't really come from a privileged background. He went to state schools. He knows the people. So I think Matt Iglesias said is like it's definitely like a value above replacement pick. It's not just a random pick that's just like average. It's probably a little bit above average. Iglesias and others thought Shapiro was the better pick. I still think on the merits Shapiro probably is the better pick. I think the issue fundamentally was Harris did not click with Shapiro, and it was just she would really want to spend like 4 years with this guy, and he probably would want to spend 4 years with her. Which that's candidates have overcome. Like VP, presidential and vice presidential, candidates have overcome bad chemistry. But whatever, she didn't want to deal with it. She liked Tim Walz, and that's that.
Yeah, sure. I think one thing that I found a little strange is it seems like in this election, there has been a lot more focus on the VP picks than in past elections. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not remembering it, but my sense is that most of the time you have the VP pick who's announced. There will be maybe, 1 or 2 days talking about them or whatever. And then it's like, okay, well, back to the presidential candidates, right? And this time, for whatever reason, it just seemed like there's just been a huge focus first on JD Vance. He was getting, I would say, for weeks, maybe more of the attention even than Trump. And now with Walz, there's been more attention to him, both in the Veep stakes, like between, him and Shapiro and Kelly or whatever. And then now after the pick, people are just giving it a lot more attention, media attention, public attention. People are talking about it in a way that I feel like they did not, when Biden picked Kamala, for example, okay, there were some stories about, oh, she's going to be the first, Black woman VP, Indian woman VP, whatever, like all that stuff, right? But it mostly was not, it was not a big thing. Same thing with Mike Pence. I think you have to go back to maybe like Sarah Palin in 2008, right? To find a candidate with that much attention. I don't know if that's because the main candidates have just been laying low. I mean, it's August, so.
Well, okay, so I think a couple of things.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a couple of things. I think one thing is we all know Trump.
Right.
Biden was like the candidate for a while, and like he's been around since He's been around as a politician since the Nixon era. Literally true, right? What's there new to say about him aside from the fact that he's maybe dying? You know? So, and the second thing related to the first, we live in an age of like constant need for content. We're part of it, we're producing content right now. And so, you need a lot of stuff to talk about. JD has an interesting life. He wrote a memoir,
That's right.
It's kind of weird writing a memoir in your 20s, but whatever, he did it, So he wrote a memoir that was turned into a film. So that's a lot of content. Yeah, and also like there is a lot of content from him. Like there's like the narrative arc of, kind of like lower middle class, upper lower class. I think that was his background. Then eventually he goes to Ohio State, military, Yale, blah blah blah. That's an arc, and that's actually like a pretty normal arc. Then there's the other arc is that he married Usha Vance, who's an Indian American. Okay, that's an interesting arc. Then there's the other arc where he's in all these like group chats and like right wing spaces with really weird people. There's actually like a fair amount of interest. He's also his patron, his initial like kind of sponsor was Peter Thiel. That's also an interesting arc. So JD has like a lot of interesting arcs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff to talk about. A lot of conspiracy theories about Peter Thiel.
Yeah.
Like how did he become such a big deal? Who really wrote the memoir? Sam, you've seen that, right?
I have. I mean, I feel like there's a kind of a list that people go down because Obama also wrote a memoir in his 20s, I believe. And people also, there were conspiracy theories that he did not actually write it. I'm trying to think if there's any other, I guess Kennedy, it wasn't a memoir, but
yeah.
So there's certain things that like kind of recur over and over again in politics, particularly even with like conspiracy theories, like everybody's gay. I don't know if you know this, but like, every time there's some new person who comes up in politics, there are certain people who will say,
"Well, did you
he's gay?"
Did you see the way Tim Walz hugged Doug Emhoff during the? Anyway, there's a whole thing on the internet about this. So
right.
There is a whole thing about Tim Walz being gay. I mean, he was a coach. I'm just saying, there's a lot of things.
Okay.
About that.
Yeah. There's like themes that kind of recur. They're gay. Some sort of like Manchurian Candidate type stuff is pretty common. I mean, like I don't know. I people, I guess, in the same way that there's a lot of movie scripts that movies come out and they have basically the same plot. The same thing is kind of true for conspiracy theories too. Someone you don't like. What's the deal with them? Corruption, ties to extremism, they're a pervert,
Well, so I close out the VP chat with Walz. Let's say, I think the consensus, which we don't know is true, and as you said, it probably doesn't matter electorally, but JD has been. Hope you enjoyed the podcast so far. To listen to the rest of it, please go to Khanversation.substack.com.
Two minds met on a summer's eve, each with truths they long believed. Words flowed like a winding stream as hours passed in deep debate. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. In listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. It's not about who's wrong or right, but understanding others' light. In civil discourse we can find ties that gently bind. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. As dawn broke soft on dewy grass, they smiled and shook hands at last. Two souls enriched by reason talk, united in respect. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. This folk song captures the essence of a long, thoughtful discussion between two public intellectuals. It emphasizes the power of patient listening, mutual respect, and the discovery of common ground. The gentle tone reflects the common understanding they reach after their debate. Would you like me to expand on any aspects of the lyrics or discuss the themes further?